we do some hello to anybody that's not joined us or is about to join us. We're going to start the Q&A in just a couple of minutes, but we'll give you guys some time to get yourselves settled in. You know, get a bowl of popcorn to eat
or a hat of popcorn. If you're an enlightened type,
a hat of popcorn. That's.
I'm getting 2 thumbs up. We're good to go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Warcradle Studios. I'm Lee, and with me is Stuart.
Hello.
And we're here for the second Wild West Exodus Q&A. And so much has happened to us since the last one, hasn't it, Stuart?
Yes, it has. And lots of stuff happened to the game as well, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, we're a Warrior Nation hatchet's throw away from releasing the new edition of Wild West Exodus. We've just a couple of weeks to go, and plenty of questions to answer, so let's get on with those.
What, this month is coming out?
Yeah.
What month is this? September?
Yeah, September. Christmas is just around the corner.
All right, better get that book off the printers then. No, it's fine, yeah. So you're right, the second edition rulebook, or as we like to call it, the rulebook, is off to the printers. Should be here any day now. We've also got the very, very cool, super exclusive Dark Council edition of the rulebook, which is going to be for all of you faithful followers that have been taking your photographs, sticking them up on Facebook and Twitter and whatever else you crazy kids do.
The young people, Instagram,
the
Snapchat, anything that you've been using.
I barely use the Facebook or the Twitter, so yeah. And but also, so what we've done, we've had a special print run made of the new softback of the rulebook, with some extra content including some very, very ropey story.
I think it's a work of art, but
yeah. There's Lee's done a cracking short story in there, and again, only for those that have got the Dark Council edition. There's also some short stories by Craig Gallant's got a short story in there. Sarah Corkwell's got a short story or two in there. Ben Corkwell's also got a short story. There's some good stuff, some really good stuff.
Yeah, I mean the stories are meant to get you in the mood. If you weren't already in the mood, and why wouldn't you be? Just to give you a taste of the updated world of Wild West Exodus that we're going to be bringing you from now on.
Something to whet the appetite, as it were. Yes, so anyway, more of that in a moment. So we can jump straight into the questions. So actually one of the questions was about the Dark Council book. And it says, when can we expect to receive the books from the selfie campaign? Can't wait. Neither can I. So the current plan is, and obviously dependent on when it all arrives in the printer, we are expecting it momentarily. We will start to ship out all of the orders to the distributors and to the retail stores for the gubbins and rules boxes and all the other great product for second edition. At the same time, because we can do more than one thing at the same time, we're going to be shipping off the Dark Council edition of the books. So in that week, in the week leading up to the 30th. Now, it may be, depending on where in the world you are and depending on how you're getting your books, because some of you are picking them up from your local game stores, some of you they're being sent direct. Mileage may vary as to exactly when you're going to get your hands on the book. I would hope that some of you will certainly have it for the launch weekend, and I would certainly hope that all of you have it in the week following the weekend, which means you can follow along with the theme week that's coming out with Beasts of War. So myself, Darren, and Chris Pond from the studio, we went over to the sunny shores of Coleraine in Northern Ireland and spent some time with the Beasts of War guys and girls. And yeah, we did loads of videos, loads of content. So there's a whole themed week coming up for Wild West Exodus. Nearly forgot the name of the game, actually. too many games going around in my head. Yeah, for Wild West Exodus, and it'll kick off on. So we'll have the launch on the Saturday the 30th. Beast of War will have their usual weekender and all the other exciting things that they do, and then on the Monday and throughout that week is then going to be a whole host of playthrough videos, faction breakdowns, discussions, everything you could want to know about Wild West Exodus, but we're afraid to ask.
And it's not going to end there, is it? Because we're doing our own videos, which will come out as the weeks progress,
yes,
giving you even more.
They'll be better than this shaky affair, because I don't think either of us are in the videos that we'll be making here, thankfully.
Maybe.
Well, okay, well, I'm not going to be in them, so you're in for a real treat. Now, we've had Darren, Will, and some of the others from the studio have been filming playthroughs. They've been filming some kind of breakdowns on various aspects of the game, just to really make sure that, you know, new people to the game and also returning friends to the game get a really good sense as to how things are played and what they should be. Dan Byrne asks,
what would Jesse James do? Jesse James does what Jesse James does, usually with a gun.
Yeah, no, but in Jesse we trust. Jesse James would get on board with Wild West Exodus, surely.
Oh yeah, he'd be up there with
Absolutely.
a huge pile of swag. Hopefully he's paid for it. No, Jesse.
So next question. Okay. What is the point level of the starter sets? So for starter sets, the way we're going to be releasing, and this kind of gives you an idea as to our plan going forward. So posses are a really big thing in Wild West Exodus. A posse is led by a boss. So what we will be doing going forward, occasionally we will release boss miniatures on their own or legendary bosses or what have you. But more commonly now, you're going to get a boss with their theme posse. It's not the complete theme posse, but it's like the starting point of their theme posse. So in the same way that we are releasing on the 30th, the first 5 of them, so Carpathian gets Father of the Enlightened, Walks Looking gets Tribal Retribution, and so on and so on. That's the format that these sets are gonna have, these posse sets. They're going to tend to be narrative driven, and what that means is that what we aren't doing is picking the boss, looking at the points value of the boss, and then very, very precisely only including things to make it come up with a round number. There's 2 reasons for doing that. One of it is because depending on what the posse is, so for example the Wayward 8 posse, led by Marcus Wayward, if we were to limit it to a point, you'd actually get like the Wayward 6, or the Wayward be like 5.5 because one of them wasn't feeling too well. So we lowered the stats for the purposes of trying to squeeze it into a box. So not worrying too much about that lets us actually include great things in those boxes and not have to kind of tie the hands back behind the bodies of some of the characters and things just to try and artificially fit them in. But the other reason is because as the game goes on, it's a living game, and things are going to be tweaked and adjusted slightly. So we're not going to set things in stone now, which means that actually it becomes a barrier for having great products, great miniatures, and great games later. But I think underneath what you're asking, there's 2 things. So the rough point values are around 750 points. Roughly, it could be 100 either way, unless very obviously the set's different. So for example, like I mentioned, the Wayward 8, that's going to be over 1,000 points because you've got 7 faces and a boss in it. So it's going to be more than some robotic dogs and some lore bots and Morgan Earp. Yeah, so there's going to be some differences there. But where possible, we're aiming for around 750 points, and that's largely because bosses tend to fall in a similar points range of, give or take 50, 60 points. The bosses are in a similar range to each other, and also because faces and support tends to be in similar ranges to each other, and the model count is fairly consistent. So because of those things, the points will be in and around 750 points. But I said that I think there's something else there in the question. So one of the things that we really want to do is for new people coming in, and also for just a great idea for a league or a tournament, for people to be able to go just one posse, you grab the posse, and you effectively you have to take what's in the posse box, because there's some really cool stuff in all the posse boxes. Darren and some of the studio guys are working really hard on coming up with a really great posse, like initial posse themed tournament system, which we're going to roll out pretty quickly to enable you to do that. In the meantime, you can come up with your own homebrew stuff. But what we're going to make sure is that not only can you take these themed posses, but that also, if you wanted to create something of your own of a very similar point value, that there are some criteria to kind of help you do that. Because fundamentally, we're all about the story and the adventure and the excitement of the game, balance is important, but actually, I think it's one aspect of the game rather than the only aspect of the game, if that hopefully makes sense.
And the boxes that we release, the theme posses that we release, are not the totality of that boss's themed posse, are they?
Absolutely not. In fact, a lot of people, were it me, I might pick up Tribal Retribution because I think it's a great set, and then I would probably pick it up with a box set, one of the new Hands box sets coming out in October, and then get myself 5 Young Bloods and 5 Braves as well. So I've got some Hands to go with the posse, and it very naturally builds up on that. Posses themselves are, during the beta test, the posse information was kind of held on a document. That's not ideal for gaming. You don't want to be hauling around big pages of stuff. Posses are actually on cards, and they come as part of the faction decks. You have posse cards. Posse cards are double-sided. Both sides have the boss on it. One side will be the faction posse. So, for example, Walks Lookings has the Warrior Nation faction posse on one side, because as a Warrior Nation boss, she can take the standard Warrior Nation posse with no problems, and it will explain how you do that. But then on the reverse will be her specific theme posse, which is Tribal Retribution. It will identify what any of the bonuses are, any of the restrictions are, and again, what units can be taken. And that's going to be on a neat little card. It'll come alongside the rest of the unit cards when the card sets come out in November. But in the interim, they're going to be, when we go live, when the game launches, all of this is going to be available free to download anyway. So there shouldn't be, I hope, too many barriers for people getting stuck in and playing with the models and the sets that they want to play with, rather than just being able to use what we've currently released specifically packaged for 2nd edition.
I can see we're getting some enthusiasm leaking through. We've got James Mortensen, who's really excited that we're getting a full week of Wild West Exodus.
We hasn't seen it yet, unfortunately, though I did say that I'm not in very much of the video output from Warcradle, I promise. Unfortunately, I'm in quite a bit of the Beasts of War footage, so if you find my voice as nasally and monotonous as I do, you're in for a bad time.
We've got a question from James Finishin Turner. Can you tell us more about the narrative campaign thing that's been mentioned?
Narrative campaign thing?
I love how specific the question is being.
Which narrative campaign thing? In terms of okay, so the narrative of Exodus, in terms of games, there's lots of different ways you can do it. So, as an example, you can have a campaign in the way that War Machine and Hordes do, and they do very well, where it's a narrative campaign as such that changes, and actually the world changes and evolves as the game goes on. Whereas you get successive books come out, and each one of them is taking the story further and further forward and bringing certain characters to the fore and stuff, and that's really great. Yeah, I'm a fan of that way of doing things. There's also the way where you can effectively just give some basic information on what the models are or what the units are, and just let people come up with their own reasons why things happen. Some of the games like Fast on Armada, for example, is like that, where you have an idea as to who the factions are, but that's largely it. There isn't a great deal of inter-narrative. What we're doing is kind of somewhere between the two. So we are providing bags and bags and bags of information on who all the bosses are, what they're doing, who all the hands units, the faces, the support, the factions, loads of background. I mean, the rulebook, the softback rulebook coming out is 120 odd pages long.
A big chunk of that is background.
Half of it is background, and good solid background. Craig Gallant, myself, Sarah Corkwell and others, Lee, lots of people have been helping shape that background. So it's good. I think it's quite good stuff. It's quite interesting, meaty. Lots of hooks there for you to hang your own games and your own stories off of. And that's really what we want to do with Exodus. What we want to do is we want to give the players, the community, as big a sandbox of this is the Wild West Exodus setting at that particular point, 1870X. So in that time period, these are who all the major bosses are. This is all the major stuff is. We're not It's not going to lead to like an end times type of thing where we're going to start killing people off. It's not. That might happen in your games and in your campaigns, in your narrative. Fantastic. Instead, what we want to do is we want to give you as many tools to tell your own stories. So in terms of a narrative campaign, yes, there are going to be, there is an expansion to the game that we're starting to develop now for next year. But what that's going to do is that will focus on part of the frontier, part of the world, particularly dealing with one faction, but it will feature all of the factions. There will be a story involved that you can play through with other mission or other adventures that are interlinked, but it is very much happening at the same time that everything else is happening in the world. It's not chronologically different from that part of it. So really, nobody should feel like. Some games do seasons where you have like, season 2 of this game, season 3 of this game. If I'm just getting into a game and I'm coming in, it's on season 3.
You can't go back and play the games no one else wants.
I'm going to go and get excited about the stuff that's already happened. Yeah. So what we want to do is we want to give. It's always a great time to jump on board, but there's always stuff that people who have already kind of started to saturate themselves in the world. There's always new stuff to explore, and we've seen some of the stuff for next year. there's some really good stuff to explore.
Stand by the 3D printer waiting for the first ones to come off. Yeah. Yoink.
Well, the MD keeps complaining that we're using it too much, but yes, it's like a replicator from Star Trek. It's amazing. Right.
Eric Defoe says, will I need to re-buy minis I already own? No, you shouldn't need to do that.
You can do if you like. Depends how you've painted them, or depends if you've painted them, or if you've assembled them like a chimp.
Feel free to buy as many versions of any specific character as you like.
An army of Jesse James. Yeah, no, you don't have to rebuy minis. So, for example, if we look at some of the posse... So, by the nature of some of these initial posse sets coming out, because they feature characters that are already existing, some of them have new sculpts, so that might be a reason why, for example, the new Walks-looking boss sculpt in Trouble Retribution is awesome. The Carpathian sculpt is really nice as well.
There are different grades of changes that we made. For example, Carpathian is now standing on a canister of RJ 1027.
Yeah, because it tied into his backstory more, and it also enabled us to kind of refine some details on the original sculpt. So yes, some of the miniatures are available again in a slightly more pleasing form, which, if that's enough of an excuse for you to part with your hard lucre, then that's fine. But nobody's forcing anybody to buy anything again. The miniatures that are in the posse sets are only going to be available the faces and the bosses. That is the format that they're going to be in going forward. So there may be some in the short term, there may be a little duplication. If you've already bought, for example, Little Claw, and you don't have any of the rest of the miniatures in the box, well, Little Claw only comes in Trouble Retribution now. So there is that. We have made all of the miniatures that were available separately. They're still available on the the Wild West Exodus website while stocks last, because we still have a few of them left. But once they're gone, then that set's going to be the only way to get them. Other things, though, that are in the set that are more commonly encountered, like the canine automata, the brutes, which are the new brutes, and including that cool flamethrower brute, they will be available separately. They are going to be available in box sets and things, if not straight away, in very soon. So it's the best way for us to do it. And we're also got to think, yes, we want to think about the community. We've also got to think about retailers, and there's nothing worse than trying to convince your friendly local store to take the game and then say, you just have to stock these 300 different lines and you're going to be fine. Nobody's going to do that. So it's a slight balancing act, but I think it's only those that have already jumped on board that are going to maybe have to bear with us on it. Anybody coming in new to the game, it's fantastic. It should be really easy to get stuck in.
Eric's follow-up question is, are we going to do a lot of resculpts? I think for the next year at least, we've got all brand new characters and models coming.
We do. There are some resculpts because, for a few reasons, we've brought all of our resin production in-house now, and we have really good in-house resins. The posse sets that come out, they're going to be the first of our new resins, and they're really good.
They're very high quality.
Yeah. So, in fact, as good as any other
high-end resin
high-end
manufacturer.
resin company that might be out there. So yeah, we're really, really proud of them. But in order to bring them over to that level, that process, some of the existing masters and some of the existing molds and things had to be completely redone. If we're going to completely redo something, there's an opportunity there to actually look at that miniature and think, is there something more we can do? I'll give you an example. The Great Elk, which I think, so the Fire Eagle, I love the Fire Eagle for the Warrior Nation. I think it's one of the best miniatures I think that we make. The Great Elk is good. It's got a slightly kind of Ray Harryhausen vibe thing going on, but it's a good miniature, but we think we could have made it better. So we got the original sculptor to go back to it, revisit it, rework it slightly. So there is a new Great Elk. But the great thing about that is you can have multiple Great Elks in your army, in your force. So there's nothing to stop you having the original Great Elk miniature and then have the new Great Elk miniature, and you've got two very different miniatures on the table. Just one of them is more of a collector's item than the other one. So we're not resculpting lots, but where there's an opportunity to make a better miniature, we will do. You should still be able to buy the original version as it kind of phases out. But like when we're all hobbyists, we like really new, cool stuff. So the vast majority of what we do is going to be brand new, very exciting, very cool. Just what you're seeing in this month, in this launch month, is us consolidating and getting some great starter products out for people. And necessarily, because we're bringing it over to our new resin facility, you're seeing some of the existing miniatures updated and things. So September should not be, for a start, we're not going to keep bringing out 5 posses a month, but September should be seen as a special month because we're launching rather than being the way, business as usual for us.
When will we see the bases for the size changes brought on in this new edition? So that's our new base sizes and new shapes.
Yes. So, and actually, there was a related question, which
plinth
was
style.
Yeah. So plinth.
So our bases are plinth styled rather than being beveled or lip styled.
Yep.
The majority of other companies make their games. We are keeping the plinth style. So
we love the plinths.
Your old model bases will match exactly the new bases that come out.
Yeah. So the ones that we're bringing out, we brought out the XL base, which is kind of midway between the very large double XL base that some of the bigger monsters were on, and the large base that some of the big bosses and things were on. So we brought out a base for that. The first thing that came out on that is Marie Laveau, the legendary Marie Laveau. The Great Elk will be coming out on that base as well. The Wendigo now comes on that base because it looks better. And the rule of cool, if it looks better, then let's do that.
I mean, the vehicles look especially good on the stadium bases.
Yeah, you see, I know some people aren't a fan of vehicles on bases. I always found it strange. Playing pieces come on bases. I've never understood why vehicles are treated differently, but then a monster which is just as big and just as impressive, that does go on a base. And that, for me, I think it's a hangover from historical games, or Warhammer 40,000 had a thing going on there, but I digress. But in terms of how you're going to be able to get those bases, you've got there's some new base sets coming out under the Warcradle brand. We've got the medium base, the medium oval base, that's coming out in a pack. We've also got the large, the double XL oval bases for vehicles. They're coming out in a pack on their own.
And it's not a mixed pack.
No.
It's not a mixed pack. So you're not going to end up with a load of bases that you don't actually want or need. You will be able to buy just that design of base in a single pack and buy as many of them as you need to get the correct number that you need. We
want to make it as easy for you to get hold of the bases. There's 3 ways you can get them. For the short term, any of the shows and things we're at, if you just come and see us and smile, and some of you did at Gen Con, thanks for that. You'll see we have some of the bases, so we can slip you a few of the new bases. There's no problem at all. We just want you to have fun with the game. The other 2 ways to get hold of them, though, are on the Wild West Exodus website shortly. The bases will be available to purchase direct from the site.
Which means that your friendly local gaming store should also be able to get hold of them?
Absolutely, and that's the other way. So we're making sure that we've got some really great packaging, so it's nice and easy for the retailers to stock it. We're going to get those bases out to the retailers as well to be able to sell. So yeah, there shouldn't be a problem. You're going to have to bear with us through September and a bit of October for the stuff to kind of filter out. But certainly by the end of October, you should be able to get those bases from pretty much anywhere you want to.
Ben Koshnik, new to the game. Hello, Ben. Welcome to Wild West Exodus. I was wondering on your thoughts on playing with 3 people, so multiplayer games.
So is that a 4-person game if he's playing with 3 people?
Well, specifics again.
Yeah.
It's all right. James, we saw your apology. We accept it. You are forgiven.
So a three-way game, which is fine as long as you don't make eye contact, I believe. So a 3-way game. Wild West Exodus as a game is designed for 2 sides. So if you had 4 players, well, you have 2 on one side and 2 on the other. Because of the way the activation works and because of the way initiative and other things work, there are no rules in the core game in the main rules for how to play with 3 players or 5 players or what have you, where each of you is
unless you do uneven teams.
Well, that would be the way I would do it. So I would have one person with a force of, say, 2,000 points and then 2 people with a force of 1,000 points each. And ideally, because I like stories, the 2 people on one side would maybe narratively, so I could see you having Warrior Nation and Lawman, but then making sure that the Lawman player had taken Bass Reeves with his theme posse, so then actually the force represents Bass Reeves out in his territory, gathering up this large force of allies to take on whatever the threat would be. Something really horrible, like the Union or something like that.
I mean, you'll have the rules very soon and you'll be playing your own game. So if you figure something out and you want to share it with us, by all means, write in. Maybe you could do a blog post and we can share it with everybody.
Yep. I mean, for sure, if there's enough interest in something, or somebody comes up with this like amazing way, it's all about whether or not it makes the game better. So if somebody comes up with a way where having 3 people or 3 teams playing against each other in some way works out so that it isn't 2 people battering each other to bits and then the 3rd player comes in and takes out the victor, which in my experience...
I can see some characters who would find that to be the preferable way.
Yeah, but my experience of 3-player games, that tends to be how it goes. It's rare that all 3 players embrace it and all charge into the centre. But if you come up with ways to kind of help make that happen, brilliant. I mean, we're doing, as I said, we've got an expansion coming out which will be introducing or expanding one faction in particular and adding more units and bosses for all of the factions. We could put those rules in there as well. You know, I'd say there's no hard and fast yes or no's to it. It's more a case of, look, let's look at it, let's give it a go, let's play, because that's half the time something in your head sounds really good, but then you actually play it on the table and you either think, yes, I was right, I'm a genius, or else you think, that was a terrible idea, I must keep it secret, no one must know. Either way, let's do that, let's play it through, post it on the Dark Council, feedback to us, and who knows. But it will be credit where credit's due. So if you come up with an amazing version of how to play the game, we'll acknowledge that, yes, you have done a good thing.
Here's an interesting question. Any chance of mountain men turning up as allies for the Warrior Nation?
Yes. Yes, there is always a chance.
If you frame your question, any chance of, that's your answer. So
well, yeah, okay.
That saves us a lot of time.
Being more specific, we are exploring lots of... So 2017 was about building the game up to get to a certain point, which is the launch of the game in its form, and then kind of consolidating that and making sure that all of the factions have got really easy ways to get on board and to start to play. 2018 is building on that, yeah, but it's also about having a little bit of fun with the format as well. So when we start to talk in later videos, we'll start to talk about some of the new bosses and new posses coming out. They start to play with some of the themes that we're talking about. So yes, yes, there will be scope for Men of the Mountains and all sorts of stuff. Right. Okay. Abu Bakr says, will stat cards be produced, or do we just download from the site?
Both.
Well, no, it's one, because he said, or do we just? So yeah.
Stat cards will be available.
Yes.
If you buy the new Posse sets, you'll have stat cards for those models in there.
They do.
You will be able to download stat cards for everybody upon release.
On launch. But we are going to do printed faction decks in November, which will include cards for every single unit up to that point. And it will also include a few cards for units that are coming out in the foreseeable future, because there's no point giving you cards for something that isn't coming out for 8-9 months. But for the foreseeable future, there'll be some cards. Anything new that comes out, any new product that contains units that have not been in the game previously, they will always include those cards. So when you get the product, you can play that straight away out of the box. They will only be in those boxes though while they are a new thing. Once we then, because we're going to re-release, or not re-release, we're going to release the cards, the faction decks every year, roughly. When we do a new update to the card deck and we bring it out, it will collect up all of the other cards for that faction, or related to that faction, that have been released up to that point. Once that comes out, then those individual cards will stop appearing in new prints, new releases of that product that came out previously. So while it's a new product, and until it gets basically digested into this omnibus of cards that we're going to release each year or so, yes, the cards are going to be in the product, but then they'll be removed from there. The main reason we're going to do that is because for retailers in particular, it just keeps it really easy. What we don't want people doing is buying a product and it having cards that are 2-3 years out of date, or even in addition out of date eventually, and so immediately it's a complete waste of time, and it's not fair on us to expect other retailers to start breaking open product and taking out old cards and putting in. It's never going to work.
Yeah, the product becomes less desirable the longer it's on the shelf, so it makes sense for us to update it on a regular basis.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of the idea there.
Christopher Andrew asks, what are you looking forward most? Things I can't tell you about.
That's a horrible answer.
But in the short term, I'm really looking forward to getting hold of the Father of the Enlightened posse, because I want to start my Enlightened force.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to. I think the Gubbins box, the rules and Gubbins box, is one of the best things we're doing. Because it's going to you've got your action and adventure decks all printed. I'm tactile, so I like physical things. You're going to get your counters, fantastic. You're going to get your template. The new template's awesome, and it's slightly different from the one that we beta tested with. So there's some really great stuff, really great stuff coming out. But that set, because for me, that will represent the end of a particular journey, which is going out to Arizona, meeting with the guys at Outlaw, Romeo, Tyler, Jeff, people like that, and those initial stages. And now this absolutely is Wild West Exodus for us, and just seeing that out there, seeing that in people's hands, yeah, I'm very excited.
Sarah says it's all about the base, which is absolutely correct. So take off your coat and come back.
No. She should. That's taxi. Right. Chuck de Armand or de Armand. By the way, I apologise in advance about murdering anybody's names. I understand that I was triggering people with
Conquistadors.
So yeah, I understand that was triggering some people. I apologise for the conquistadors, but what can you do? So Chuck, sorry if you've already covered this. It's quite all right, Chuck. I joined late. Will there be a Kickstarter campaign coming up? If so, details please. Ooh, yes, we can talk about Kickstarters.
For the main game, no.
I think we'll leave it there.
Yes.
So it is not on our plan to release a Kickstarter for Wild West Exodus in terms of the tabletop game as we have it, because I think Kickstarters, you kind of it's almost like holding a concert just for your fans. So for a tabletop war game, I don't think they necessarily translate very well. It tends to upset your retailers, and I mean I've done too many Kickstarters. I've backed Kickstarters where for a tabletop game before, I won't name which one, and I've ended up with hundreds and hundreds of dollars of miniatures, which is fantastic. But if nobody else is playing the game or nobody else is playing with the bits that have been released, it's rubbish. I think board games, Kickstarters are great for board games, and they're great for kind of self-contained things where if you back it and you get it, you can then bring it down to the club and actually everybody's playing with that stuff. That's brilliant. Role-play books, I think, are good for that, and stick-on soles for your feet, which is something I backed recently, which is kind of cool.
What would you prefer to have? Would you like to wait months and months and months and then have a mounting of stuff arrive and that be it? Or would you prefer to have regular releases every single month?
It's a trick question because we're doing one and we're not doing the other. So, yeah. So, yes, we're not going to do Kickstarters. So the details are, there are no details for Kickstarters for the tabletop game. Warcradle may do Kickstarters, but if we did, it would be for something more self-contained and something special and cool in its own right, not just a plug-in for an existing game. But we won't talk anymore about that.
How will factions work in Second? Can I take Outlaws with Golden Army? Is it possible to do that in New Edition Rules? Golden Army is Outlaws, if I recall correctly.
So, okay, and this ties into to a few things. So, Dark Nation is the posse that Wickersasny, which is like the tainted wraith apparition of orcs looking, that's the name of her posse. So you can collect a Dark Nation army with Wickersasny leading it, and it can be huge. It can be your entire force can be the Dark Nation. It's only going to feature, because it's a theme force, it's only going to feature very specific units, and there are new Dark Nation units coming out for the Hex. On the cards, they'll be identified with Dark Nation, so it's not something that's going away or disappearing. It's just being kind of interpreted in a different way in the game now.
I mean, if you've got a posse from the first edition of the game, you can still use it in second
Absolutely.
edition. We haven't thrown anything into the bin and said, right, we're not using that anymore.
No, all the models from first edition you can use in second edition. Just how they're used some might be slightly different, but again, it'll all be from the point of view of the narrative and the story and the factions, and we hope it means that it gives you more options for the. So if you looked at the Dark Nation, you had models in the Dark Nation that didn't necessarily fit to that particular theme. So now we've kind of opened it up a little bit more. So the Dark Nation are part of the Hex. They're a subgroup within the Hex. So you can collect the Hex and have Wickersasny and have loads of cool Dark Nation theme models, and also take some other stuff like Marie Laveau and some other bits and pieces, or you can just do the Dark Nation. On paper, your army is a Hex army, but your force is your posse is a Dark Nation posse rather than just a Hex one.
Yeah,
so
and your Golden Army posse is an outlaw posse.
Yeah, well, the Golden Army is really interesting because the Golden Army is a prophecy in Wild West Exodus. There was a prophecy was given that a Golden Army will basically sweep through the frontier, sweep through the Sunset Lands, and will change the world. So Pancho Villa, his theme posse is called the Golden Army, which is great. There will be another boss coming out whose posse will be along the lines of the Golden Army as well, because different bosses are going to think that the prophecy refers to them. Pancho Villa's a pragmatic man, so what he's done is he's heard what the prophecy is, and it's referred to a child from a particular part of Mexico, and he's gone, well, that kind of applies to me. I didn't quite live in exactly the right region, but if I now say that I do, that will kind of make sense. So because of the way Pancho, his mind works, he's reinventing himself and calling his army the Golden Army to fulfill prophecy, rather than the prophecy revealing something that already exists. He's not going to let a little thing like detail slow him down.
Sounds like a franchise.
quite
The American
possibly.
dream made real.
Yeah, or the American nightmare potentially. Depends on how Poncho's plan plays out. So there is going to be Poncho Villa's posses coming out, the Golden Army. That will be a posse set coming out next year. And there's some great stuff in there. But there will also be other things that will be Golden Army that aren't necessarily what you would immediately expect, but they will play together really well. And you'll see some of that being revealed as time goes by.
I like Abu Bakar's question. Will the narrative advance periodically, and will characters evolve, die, or change factions? I think our novels will help push the narrative forward, won't they?
They will do. Okay, so we're not George R.R. Martin. We're not going to be killing people off. If Marcus Wayward or if Jesse James dies, it will be on your tabletop. It will be in your games that happens. We're not going to arbitrarily release a piece of fiction or a short story where we just kill off some of the characters of the game.
Might hurt them quite a bit.
Oh, we're going to hurt them a lot.
I mean, you can lose a leg and still live.
Yes,
as the Enlightened will tell you.
but we aren't going to. They're your characters. Yeah, once they're out there, they're your characters to tell the stories. It's not. We will tell some of the stories that they've been in, but as to their ultimate fate and their destiny, that's for you. That's for you guys to decide. That's not for us. Changing factions.
We have a lot of posses with multiple factions.
Yeah, where characters have that in their background, because we try and give people a fairly full background, a fairly interesting background, where they have that multi-faction thing going on. We're setting that out from the outset. I'm not ruling out in some point in the future we might add a faction to somebody's allegiance if the story that people are playing, if there's like a common thing coming up with, if people are saying, oh, wouldn't it be great if so-and-so could be taken for Warrior Nation because this makes lots of sense. Sure, we could look at that, and maybe in an update to the card we might make that available. But I think there'd have to be a really good story reason to do it, and those stories, I guess, are ultimately going to come from you guys.
I mean, Captain Nimue is a good example because she is a crown agent, and she's an outlaw because once she gets to the US, she's not acting really in the best interests of the natives. Yes,
I agree. But the things that will come out for her, so her theme posse is a crown posse. It's not an outlaw posse. So usually, if they have multi-faction abilities and things. Though it means that they can be taken as a boss in that faction posse, so in lots of different faction posses. So Nimue, for example, or Nimue, depending on how you want to pronounce it, she can lead an outlaw posse or an outlaw mercenary posse, because the outlaws work slightly differently, as is explained in the rules.
Money speaks, money
It
talks.
does. So she could lead a horde of mercenaries, and so she could have bandits and raiders. She could have Frank James in there. She can, like a real eclectic mix of stuff. But she won't be able to take any of the theme things that are part of the crown.
Any of the super cool themed things.
Chowkidars and
Drum.
Sada Hardit Singh and drum and all the other really cool things that come with the Nautilus posse. But we'll cover that at a later point.
We've said too much already.
We have.
Any word on an app for cards and such?
App
from Eric Defoe.
Yeah, we talked about the app before. Happy to keep talking about it. The app is one of these things we are looking to do an app for sure. We need to make sure though that what it's not going to be is it's not going to be integral to play the game. It will be a supporting thing for the game. So it's not going to be like War Room where you play the game off the app. I don't think that's right for where we are with the game at the moment. In terms of as a card digest or a card gazette, for want of a better word, a way to manage your collection, that's something we're actively looking at, but we only want to release something like that if it's actually going to be quite good. We could pump something together quite quickly and it just be some a glorified PDF kind of shuffleable pages thing. We think we can do something a bit nicer, so it won't be this year, but we will be actively pursuing it next year to look at doing that. When I talk about this year, next year, and things, you have to bear in mind, because there's lots of different developments going on. I'm trying to give people an idea of roughly when to expect it. Please don't take that as a set in stone. We're not going to bust a gut to make sure that by the 31st of December next year that app is absolutely out in people's hands. But we're going to do everything we can reasonably to try and make sure that that's the case. But there's some very exciting things looming for Wild West Exodus and Warcradle in general. So that will also dictate how some of this, that might speed things up, or it might delay things. But we're always going to make sure that we announce anything really cool and exciting. We're going to try and announce and let people know as early as possible, so that you can start to foam up and get very excited, as we will be.
And next year means all of next year. Don't expect January for anything that we may say next year.
No, it's like I tell my children, something will be ready in 5 minutes. They know that Daddy's 5 minutes means 5 hours. Right. Please put, so Nick Rotherow says, please put a Sasquatch in for the Hex.
Isn't a Sasquatch a Canadian thing?
Yeah, well,
there's borders. Nature doesn't respect borders.
Wild West Exodus isn't just about the American frontier. Okay. Look, I can't. There are things for the Hex coming out that could be like Sasquatch, Sasquatches, Sasquatchy.
Sassy.
There are Sasquatch-like things coming out for other factions as well. You just have to watch this space. We are trying to. This kind of ties into some of the things when some of these new characters were created and so on, which people ask questions about. We're trying to make sure that it's a really distinctive world. So rather than just lifting, so an actual Sasquatch won't be in Wild West Exodus.
I think an actual Sasquatch would be quite afraid of most of the things that we've got coming out for the Wild West Exodus world. I don't think he would stand up very long against some of the creatures and people who are coming.
Yeah, and being an indigenous creature, an indigenous tribe creature, it would more likely fall into the warrior nation. But we would want to make sure that it was a very Wild West Exodus version, or of that myth, of that creature, of that idea. So yes, we have some really cool stuff coming along. We have something very much in that vein. Its appearance and how it comes into the world may surprise you, and we'll look at that next year.
I see we've got a couple of questions about vehicles. Tom Kenny says, how are light and heavy vehicles figuring in? They're great pieces to look at, which is true, but really feel broke. Most all, reports I have seen have been that the game is infantry based. And then Ben Koshnik says, any thoughts on vehicles seeming underpowered? So there's a bit of a debate going on there.
Okay. Yes, so vehicles are not the be-all and end-all of Wild West Exodus. They are really cool. They are really iconic on the table.
The vehicle doesn't suffer from dark past which haunts its nightmares.
No,
it doesn't have a lot of narrative opportunities on its own.
Yeah, firepower-wise, they're really good because from a rules point of view, they can fire all of their weapons for a single action, which is really good. Particularly like the Rolling Thunder, that's devastating.
But that costs.
So, as is right, if somebody puts their mind to it and really starts to hammer a vehicle, the chances are they will take it out. I mean, you can spend your boss's fortune to try and, with largesse, to try and keep the vehicle in if you really want to keep it in there. But it's right though. There's nothing worse than having. I mean, there are some games where you can field nothing but a couple of like giant, oversized robot things, and your opponent's got very little they can do to stop them, and game's got to be fun for both people. So there is that balance with vehicles. So vehicles are not the unstoppable leviathans that there were in the first edition of the game. They're not quite as fragile because of the way that you can enhance them and buff them, and you've got to be clever with them as well. Make use of terrain, and accept that if you're bringing your vehicle forward and you're putting it in harm's way, it is going to draw a lot of fire. it might not survive till the second or third turn, but actually that does then mean that all of that firepower hasn't been thumping into the face of your boss, or it hasn't been chewing up all your troops either. So there's vehicles absolutely have a role to play. It's a different role to how they were in first edition, but that doesn't make them any less important in how the game is on the table. But fundamentally, the game is about heroes and characters and monsters and armor. So that's one of those four cool things.
James Mortensen says, Sasquid, love child of Marie Laveau. Marie has a lot of children. She has a very large family who she loves dearly. None of them are squid people that we know of.
Yes, we'll not talk about that. Right. Jethro Van Vacaris. That's an awesome name. What about the Aztec Maya concepts that you showed a long time ago? Are they part of the Golden Army prophecy? Yeah, what about them? No, they're not part of the Golden Army prophecy.
Warrior Nation.
Yes, they are part of the Warrior Nation. How they feature and why they feature is going to be revealed next year. Yes, there are some very cool things coming though.
But if you get hold of your rulebook and you read up on the Warrior Nation at the back of the book with all the other background pieces, you'll get an inkling of who and why they are, just like any other Warrior Nation style people we may have.
Yes.
So a lot of your questions may well be answered in a couple of weeks, but then they're just going to spawn a whole slew of more questions.
The Warrior Nation, the only thing I would say about the Warrior Nation is, so the Warrior Nation look the way they do in terms of the miniatures and probably what most people think of the Warrior Nation, because we're looking at the battles in the world, we're looking at them in the American frontier. So the indigenous peoples in the American frontier are the Native Americans, largely. So that's why they're a very strong part of that narrative. Were Wild West Exodus, it wouldn't be called Wild West Exodus, but were it set in Africa, then the Warrior Nation, and there is Warrior Nation in Africa, would be the indigenous peoples in Africa, would be the tribes and things in Africa.
And same with Australia,
the Aboriginals,
China.
Yep.
Every continent has, more or less,
has Warrior Nation. Some of them have stopped communing with the Great Spirit and have forgotten the old ways. Some of them are rediscovering those ways, but again, that's part of this really large, rich sandbox that we're hopefully providing to have a lot of fun in.
Joe Flesh has a good question. How much of a change is there from the final beta documents to the released rulebook? Are we essentially playing the game, or are there large changes we've yet to see?
The beta test, he was about 90% of the finished game. So what we did, we brought it back in-house, we gave it some more kickings, we played it through some more, we refined it some more. So some things have changed. Functionally, how the game works is the same as the beta. There's been quite a few refinements. There's been a couple of new rules and conditions have been added, and the way some of the things interact with them has been kind of tightened up and cleaned up. We're changing the way that some of the we're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to play. So some of the ways that terrain and miniatures interacted has been tightened up a bit, but 90-odd%. I couldn't give you an exact figure, but certainly in the mid-90s of content from the beta is present in the new rulebook. It's a brand new book though. John Cartwright in our graphic design part of the studio, he's done a brilliant job. It's a really, really good looking book. I think it's, immodestly I might say, I think it's one of the best rulebooks out there, certainly of its type.
And a lot of you are getting it for free. How lucky are you?
Yeah. Yeah, they're getting a better version of the book though, because they're getting those extra short stories. There will be a hardbacked, large format, so A4 sized format version of the book in November, and that's going to be even more special. That's going to have loads of short stories, loads more art, painting guides, tons of extra background The rules are exactly the same though. We've been careful, even down to the page. The particular page numbers are exactly the same for the rules section as they are in the large format as well as the softback. So, you know, don't worry about it on that score. Can we please recognise how awesome it is that Warcradle is looking to represent the global universe and the diversity therein? Diversity is, I think, it's really important. People have asked me about this at some of the shows. I'm not going to get too soapboxy. So there's lots of reasons why we have developed the world and redeveloped Wild West Exodus. I've talked about this before, and I won't go on about it. But I guess, so I have a daughter, and I have a son as well, and I want to make sure that they both see things in the game that they can aspire to and that they enjoy. And I want lots of other people to recognise things in the world. Just because the game's set at the end of the 19th century doesn't mean it needs to have 19th century values. Warcradle's a modern company, and the people, it's a game at the end of the day, so it should represent the people and the attitudes of people playing the game, not some archaic notion where everybody looks like John Wayne, and that's not the world that we live in. And so I guess if we were to take any liability with it, I mean, it's a fantastical period anyway. You know, we've got werewolves and aliens and things, but I'm an optimistic person, and the Exodus setting is ultimately an optimistic place, and I want it to be the world I wish it was then, not the world that it necessarily was. Yes, it's got some terrifying, monstrous, horrific things happening in it, but fundamentally, nobody really wants to burn the planet. Nobody wants to enslave somebody just because of who they are. They'll enslave them for lots of other reasons, and they'll torture people and they'll kill people, but they kind of discriminate equally on that regard. But yes, modern attitudes, modern sensibilities, game set in the end of the 19th century. Yeah, go make that work. Next, what's that one from Chris Hoare? Was there any consideration to purchase any of the Spartan Games IP to merge expand with WWX, like maybe Dystopian Wars? It's an idea. Yeah, I mean, I've always liked Spartan Games stuff. I thought it was very sad what happened. Yeah, look, I think there's, you know, I think it's very easy for people to judge what happens to these companies out there. Yeah, I feel very sorry for what's happened to everybody involved, both people, you know, people that were fans of the game, and also people that worked at Spartan. So yeah, just a sad situation, and you know, we wish them all the best.
Ben Koshnik again. Do you see the Union Heavy Rail train set fitting into the game? I can't find any stat cards for it online. Will it be a part of normal skirmishes, or is it more scenario-based model?
Right, so there are different types of unit in the game. So you have the hands, the bosses, the faces, and all the things that you normally encounter. One of the things, though, that we also have, though, we have things called strategic units. So strategic units are units that you can include in your force. They do cost points, but you include them in there's a particular way that you can include strategic units. Strategic units include things like angry mobs. Well, the miniatures for those look amazing. The civilians, booby traps, but also the train. There is a way that the train can be included. We aren't including the train straight away, the Union Heavy Rail, for several reasons. One, because it's massive, and its very presence on the table really does change how the game would work. I would use it as a terrain piece for now. We are going to produce some rules to help people interact with it more in the game. I do think that the Heavy Rail is worthy of its own expansion, its own particular way, its own particular set of adventures to really get the most out of it. So that's something we're looking to do. I can't give you a time scale on it because I don't know if I mentioned it or not. It's massive, so we just need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that we're not making like a Thunderhawk gunship that only some people can afford. We want to try and do something that's
accessible,
more accessible. That's a good word. I
mean, the train heist is one of the classic Wild West stories. So you have plenty of opportunity to form your own narratives using that model or a similar model that you have, because a train is a train.
Well, I don't know.
I don't know if anyone has a train as mighty as our train.
Yeah, it's a pretty good train.
But it's up to you. You once you've got your rules and your models, what you do with them is entirely up to you. Sarah's agreeing with you. Something we've spoken about with her on multiple occasions. Speaking from a writer's perspective, particularly a female writer, in the notoriously male-dominated environment of gaming, I would add that it's a pure joy to have so many diverse characters to choose from.
I really like, and you're going to see that going forward. Thanks, Sarah. That's very nice of you to say. There's, I find though that when they come out, the great thing about Exodus, I think, is that every time we see new characters coming out from the, I feel like old, bless him, old Brucey from the dancing program. What was it called?
Strictly Come
Strictly, yeah. And where he used to always tell people, "Oh, you're my favourite." Every time new characters, it's like at the moment, Helena Miller, the new lawman boss, who we'll talk about in another video. She's my favourite. She's amazing. She's really cool. She's got a jetpack and everything. Yeah, every time they bring something out, and it can be male, female, beast, alien, you know, wherever, they're all really cool. And I think not getting hung up on certain things and just focusing on whether or not a character's cool or not is, yeah, that's a really good place for us to be in, I think. Jens. Yeah.
Seems that the game has turned to a more fictitious fantasy, or whatever you want to call it, version of our world than the first edition. Will characters changing from the real-world versions? Will there be more characters based on real-world people? Or is that a closed chapter? Legendary Queen victory for the win.
No,
well, it's always been a fantasy setting.
It's got werewolves in it, Jens.
Yeah,
come on.
I mean, even the science fiction, the best science fiction settings are technically fantasy because the things that they use to do things aren't real; they're made up. There is no real world equivalent of a transporter. There's no real world equivalent of a warp engine. Same as there's no real world equivalent of an RJ powered jetpack.
Yes. So the game has. See, when I thought when you first said that, it said has it turned into a more facetious fantasy? And I thought, okay.
Well, people have to tell us.
Yeah, perhaps. So the game is more fantastical. It's on a larger scale, not just in terms of scope, but in terms of what it is. So I think it's probably fair to say that
it was never a purely historical game.
No, but I think it's also fair to acknowledge that the game is more fantastical now. Things are large, even larger. The brush we've used to paint things, well, luckily because my eyes are terrible, but in terms of sketching things out, things are much larger than life, bigger and bolder. And probably the big bold stuff from first edition is now still up there, but it's not the strangest thing now in the game. Will we have more real world people in there? So, okay, the Exodus world is like a dark reflection of our world. So, will there be so Bass Reeves, for example, who I hasten to add was a character that was added to the game on Warcradle's watch and is based on a real person.
An awesome real person.
It's an amazing moustache. Bass Reeves, though, he isn't the same Bass Reeves as a historical character. He shares the same name, and no doubt some of his backstory will be very, very similar, but he isn't, because too many things have happened in the past to put the world on a different path. So General Grant, Odysseus Grant, he isn't Ulysses S. Grant. He's not just changed his name. He's a different character. He would have quite possibly had a younger brother that died, and Odysseus, as the other brother, or another brother, he had a large family, his path in some ways mirrored Ulysses' path, but in other ways is very different. So, like the huge amount of burns and everything else he had going for,
skin
and,
is a big difference,
and the lack of compassion. So yes, you will get yes, there will be historical or characters that are familiar, but they will always be a reflection, a twist on them. So will there be legendary Queen Victory? Is that Victoria? Is that supposed to be?
Possibly,
okay.
Yes.
I'm assuming Victoria. If there's some really great legend of the West that I've missed out on called Queen Victory, I apologise for my ignorance. But Queen Victoria, we probably wouldn't bring that out for two reasons. One, because in the real world or in the fantasy world, having good old Queen Bess running around, or Queen Victoria running around doing her thing, I'm not quite sure what she'd bring to the table. But also, I don't know, I just think there's kind of probably something a little bit cooler we could do. We do have, for the crown, we do have characters that are, so Benedict Arnold is one of the bosses coming out for the crown next year.
The same Benedict Arnold who betrayed West Point to the hated British?
No, it's not the same Benedict Arnold, because he would have died like 100 years ago. It is his grandson, I believe, or his great-grandson. I'd have to double check, but he obviously has the weight of the name and
did his parents not like him? They named him the same as his infamous grandfather.
Oh yeah, but no, it was fine, because it's, keep it in the family. So there will be those historical parallels. There are some new characters coming out who will be familiar to people who like to do their research. But so no, there's no door that's closed. We're going to continue to come up with new and cool and interesting characters, and if there's a little nudge and a wink to historical figures, yeah, absolutely, we'll do that. But we don't want to be tied to literally representing a historical figure, because it's not a historical game. It's its own thing.
I keep seeing the words war bison.
War bison, yeah, I saw. So there was a whole bunch of stuff that we inherited from Outlaw, loads of concept art. Some of it was shocking in terms of terrifying. Some of it was amazing, and some of it was interesting. The bison, I think, is really amazing. I love the idea of the war bison. If we can come up with a cool way to get it into the game, because bear in mind it's essentially a gigantic resin paperweight, so we need to work out a way how we can do that interestingly. You bet we want to bring that out. I think it looks great.
Is the setting of the game going to expand? I think it already has expanded, and you will see that when you get your rule books. Are we only going to play in America, or is there a chance to see other continents and factions? Imagine the Boxer Rebellion with RJ 1027 in the mix.
Right.
Well, the game is Wild West Exodus,
yes,
and it is based firmly in the American West. The rest of the world does exist. There are other factions don't just exist in America, they exist all over the world. So you will find Enlightened in Europe, and you'll find Enlightened in Russia and all other sorts of places. Mm-hmm. Same as you will find the Warrior Nation in Africa, in China, and everywhere else. Obviously, the Union is very much centred in America, because that's where it comes from. But there is a much wider world out there, which we will explore in the future. But for now, we are very much centred in the West. But the rest of the world is coming to the West, so you will see that. Yeah,
Wild West Exodus will always be about the American frontier, because that's where it's set. But that doesn't mean that we won't do other things that explore the world, as Lee was saying, in different ways. And there might be some things that cross over really well, assuming the scale's the same. And there'll be concepts that will be familiar. So, for example, the crown, when you see the crown in Wild West Exodus, they have a particular feel. We've not just taken a load of Union guys, put pith helmets on them and thrown them into Wild West Exodus. They are the crown as they are in the frontier. So lots of East India Trading Company, lots of privateers like Ninmu, and some other stuff that we will reveal. But if you went to Europe, if you went to Britain, the crown would be very different there, because obviously that's its homeland. So if we were to set something in Britain, God knows, yeah, it's a terrible, overcast, cold, bitter place.
So smoggy.
Yeah. But were we to do that, it would look different. It would be a different game to Wild West Exodus, but very clearly part of that world, if that makes sense.
It would have recognisable facts in it, because you'd have Enlightened in there, you'd have the Crown in there, and who knows what else.
You can't have a game called Wild West Exodus and not have the Wild West in it, in my opinion. Whatever the Wild West, whatever part, because the frontier is huge, but you can't. We're going to play Wild West Exodus in Africa. That seems strange. But if you're going to play something in that world, or what's going on in Africa or in Australia, what's Ned Kelly up to, or whatever, yeah, sure, we can look at that.
I mean, as Stu said, the West is huge, and there's lots of different types of terrain you can find there. There's cities, there's towns, there's deserts, there's mountainous regions, there's underground complexes, all sorts of things where you can set your games.
Right, we'll jump on to another one. We're going to jump across, and we're nearly out of time. We're over time, but I'm just going to keep talking for a bit until somebody pulls the plug. Very, very quickly, so Jethro asks, will the new themed posses with brand new miniatures be all plastics or mix of plastic and resin? Yes. So depending on what they are, as I say, our primary driver for making posse boxes is that they're cool, rule of cool. So if you take something like the forthcoming Viridian Clade posse, the brand new Viridian Alpha Sculpt, and he's awesome, he's resin. The Viridian Chigo and Viridian Locusts that you can build in the box are plastic, because they're part of the multi-part plastic kit. But then there's also the Viridian betas. There's a Chigo beta and a Locust beta. And so again, you've got different types of materials depending on what the miniatures are. The posse box will be a mixture, whereas the Wayward 8 posse is all plastic. The Deadly 7 posse is all plastic. There will be a posse, I believe. There's an Order posse coming out, I believe, that's all resin. It really does depend on what the miniatures are, what the posse is. So there's no hard and fast rule, and particularly as we have our own resin facility and the resins are really nice, why wouldn't we also take advantage of that? It shouldn't affect the price one way or the other for the customer, which is the important thing. What about a roadmap for your plans, medium to long term? Not full details, but a big scheme of things to come.
Regular releases,
yeah.
Main thing. Lots of regular releases every month, bringing out something new for you to try.
Lots of posse boxes. So when we release a posse, we will also release a Gubbins box compilation with it. So you'll see posse starter sets and posse sets. Posse starter sets is the same new posse, but it's bundled with a Gubbins set, which means actually that contains everything you need to get started with the game. But the posses will always be available separately as well, and we'll be bringing them out a fairly steady stream, the release schedule permitting. The idea being that certainly by the end of next year, every posse should have physically as a product, every faction, physically as a product, there should be, I would imagine, 2 at least for every faction. And then you'll have the cards where you can create your own posses based on the themes. So yeah, the game should be in a fairly good place in terms of releases. We want to do an expansion next year, and if that's successful, we'll do an expansion the year after, because again, we think there's lots to tell, lots to explore in the world, and anything else we will cover in the fullness of time. Should we do a couple more going? You pick 2 and I'll pick 2. So.
I'm going to go with Phil Redding and Chris Nielsen's 2, because that counts as 1, so that gives me another 1. Will there be Chinese? Any thoughts on having an Asian faction? Well, we're all about diversity, as we've already said, and the Celestials have a heavy Chinese influence. And of course, the Chinese helped build the West with the rail network, and they did plenty of mining. So yes, they are definitely there. They will be coming. I can't say much more than that.
No.
There is a section on the Celestials in the rule book, which will give you far more details than we have time for right now.
It does talk about the immortal Jade Emperors, which is quite
nasty bunch.
Really nasty bunch. Keep your mouth closed.
Right. Then you do one while I
find
one.
I'll do one then. Will we have some previews before the release? So previews.
We don't have much time now.
Yeah, we're not going to release anything more from the rule book. As I say, you can get 90% of the rules from the beta. In terms of other things, so Lee and I have been talking about some of the posses coming out in 2018. So there's a few videos that will be coming out soon with lots of pretty pictures and lots of narrative discussion and things, and not a lot else in terms of specific detail. But
Christopher Andrew, your earlier question about what we're most looking forward to, please see upcoming videos.
So which one would yours be? The Warrior Nation one?
Nay.
Oh, yeah, the Lawman one. Okay, interesting. Right. Okay, so hopefully that helps.
I'm going to go with, could you make these Q&A sessions a quarterly event? That seems too few, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we necessarily
need to schedule them.
Yeah, but as and when schedules permit, we will try and do one. I think it was probably slightly too long since we last did one, so we'll do the next one sooner. We'll probably do the next one following on from Beasts of War's themed week. I think that would make sense.
That will certainly give you plenty of things to ask questions about.
Oh, yeah, and you'll have your rule books by then, and you'll be looking at it going, what's a hex geode? What? What?
It's very important, that's what it is.
Is that a reference to Cthulhu in there? Well, maybe it is. And lots of other things like that. Why have you made the Watchers good guys?
Everyone's a good guy.
Everybody's.
From their own perspective.
All villains are the heroes of their own story. Right, okay, so my one. Let's have a look. We scroll through that list. Either of them. I'm picking one. This is all good.
There's too many good questions. We don't have enough time to get through them all. This is why we need more Q&A sessions.
No, done all that. Scroll up. Okay.
Painting guides, extra content.
Yeah, there's lots of questions, aren't there? Go on. What about on that side, the live stuff? Go on. Let's have a look at okay. So last, I'll do.
That one's flashing. Why?
I think. So we have Samantha is sitting next door, and she's been brilliant all evening. Bear in mind, they're all giving up their time freely to help kind of make this a success. So Sam's the wonderful woman who coordinates all of the Trailblazer tours. So if people like the way that the Trailblazers have been organised and going out there, yes, Darren is the ever youthful face of the Trailblazer programme, but Sam is the one that kind of coordinates and makes it all happen. She also makes sure that our roadshows and things turn up to Gen Con and other places all around the world. So she's kind of a big deal, but we don't like to let on just in case she asks for a pay rise. But looking at things, she's flashing up Abu Bakr's one, and I'm not going to take this as my question. I'm going to ask it because I feel Sam wants me to ask it, but this doesn't count as my one, which is, are you guys going to do any YouTube how to play videos? There are a whole bunch of video content coming out from not just the bits that you'll see in the Beasts of War themed week, but Warcradle themselves, the studio team, are producing loads of video content, how to play, breakdowns of particular sections of the rules. There'll be Q&As like this. There's going to be painting guides by Lewis. There's loads of stuff. I might even do an armchair moment with me and one or two of the bloggers out there. And I think we need to get old Andrew down here at some stage and yeah, we need to start to do some stuff, some interactive stuff as well. So lots of videos, lots of content. If you've got suggestions on the kind of stuff you'd like to see, you know, post in, start shouting about it, and we will do everything we can to make sure we cover it. Now it stopped flashing, so I think Sam's satisfied with my answer on that one. The last question I will take then is Warren Johnston asks, any plans for terrain? Yeah, so one of the things we've done with Wild West Exodus is we try to broaden how you can play. When you think of the Wild West, you think of Wild West towns and things.
Square buildings,
yeah,
a
street,
saloon,
yep.
a sheriff's
and that's
jail.
great, and that makes a really, really good game to play, but that can't be the only way to play. So we've worked really hard to make sure that we're opening it up. I mean, the frontier, it's like whenever you see space games and things, and they're always fighting over planets or fighting over in asteroid fields and things. Really, space is vast, and actually, 99.99% of it is just endless void and cold and death. And it's the same with the American frontier. So yes, you've got these great Wild West towns, and so there's already a range of Wild West terrain out there. Lots of third parties do it. We're looking at doing some ourselves. We've got some great ideas, but again, we want to make sure it's the best terrain that we can possibly do, and it's got to be Wild West Exodus terrain. It can't just be a saloon. It's got to be a kind of cool saloon with neon signs and RJ generators and all sorts of cool stuff. Maybe like defense guns on the doors, just in case the patrons get too rowdy.
I mean, if you've been to Gen Con recently, or if you've been to UK Games Expo or Salute, you would have seen that we take really detailed theme boards with us. The first one we did was a Hex Fane, which was an occult site that was linked to the Hex, and that was set in the middle of a swamp. And at Gen Con we unveiled our Watcher Hive, which is a large mountain which is actually a hollowed out alien complex. So there limitless opportunities for you to come up with ways to play and places to play in. That you don't really have any restrictions.
By changing the game as we have and kind of opening up a bit more, what we've actually done is all the terrain that people have already bought, we've made it more likely that you can play Exodus on it. So if you had loads of rolling fields or mountainous terrain or snow terrain or even industrial complex type stuff, that's Wild West Exodus. You can play with all of that stuff because you've got places like the Promethean complexes of the Enlightened for all your industrial type stuff, or else kind of the military machines of the Union. You've got the outlaw camps and things out in the frontier, in the mesas and the desert plains and things. You've got the built-up areas. You've got the Watcher place. You can have your more science fiction-y alien buildings for outposts and things. There really is no end to any terrain that you have. You can probably fit into Wild West Exodus in some method or another. When we make our own terrain to add to your already no doubt impressive collections, we'll just make sure it's as cool as the stuff that you've got, or possibly even cooler. So you're gonna have to give us a little bit of time to do that, but it's absolutely on our plans. Cool toy soldiers first, and then stuff to fight on next. I think that is it for questions. Yeah, obviously there's lots more. Sorry we haven't answered them all. What we'll do, we'll try and save up the ones that we didn't answer, and we'll add them to our list of questions for next time. Plus, also anything else that you guys want to pitch in when we put up the advert for the next Q&A. Thank you ever so much for all of your questions. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Lee, for that fizz.
Always a pleasure.
And yeah, thank you to Simon and
Sam.
and also to Sam for everything they've done behind the scenes to make this happen. And we will catch you on the other side of the launch of 2nd edition.
See you soon.